Welcome to Twilight Terror Stories. Twilight is not just the end of day, it's the beginning of something else. A time when the shadows stretch and fear takes its first breath. You've stepped into that moment now, and the stories are waiting. Let them find you. The echo of my name slithering down that sterile corridor after dark, that's the memory branded deepest. Elias. It seeped into the quiet hum of my office, where I wrestled with columns of figures, the old building's plumbing groaning like a restless beast. 9 o'clock, perhaps later. The fluorescent tubes above buzzed, casting a sick, intermittent glare. Hours had passed since the last colleague departed. Solitude was supposed to be absolute. Yet, the whisper came, right outside my door it seemed. A voice like rusted metal scraping stone. Elias. Every muscle fiber in my body seized. A jolt like ice water flooding my veins. I rose, the scrape of my chair unnaturally loud, and approached the door. Peering into the hallway yielded nothing but elongated shadows and the miserly glow of alternate lights switched off for the night. Darkness pooled thickly in the corners. I leaned out, straining my ears against the building's quiet size. Silence. Just exhaustion, I reasoned, the screen's hypnotic flicker playing tricks. Back at my desk, the spreadsheet swam. Minutes crawled by, then, louder, Elias, fractured, desolate. Propelled by a knot tightening in my gut, I stepped out again. The sound seemed to emanate from the far end near the elevator bank. My pulse hammered against my ribs. A film of cold sweat slicked my back. Slowly, deliberately, I advanced, my gaze sweeping the floor tiles, the monotonous walls, the closed office doors. Everything held its usual place, yet the patchy illumination transformed the familiar passage into something alien. Reaching the corridor's terminus, I saw it, a door where no door belonged. Tucked beside the last office on the left, it was stark, metallic, utterly featureless. No nameplate, no number, nothing. A distinct chill radiated from it. I knew this stretch intimately, a minor obsession with the building's blueprints confirming my certainty. This wall was exterior. There was no room behind it, only empty air 7 stories above the street. Yet here stood this anomaly, exhaling cold. My throat constricted, a dry swallow catching painfully. My hand reached for the handle, half expecting resistance. It turned with unnerving ease, hinges emitting the faintest metallic sigh. Pushing it open, a mere hand's breadth unleashed a rush of frigid air against my face. Beyond the threshold lay impenetrable blackness. No shapes, no furniture, no distant walls resolved themselves. It felt like peering into a cavernous warehouse, impossibly contained within the building's skin. The air hung heavy, stagnant, tasting of dust and long disuse. Hesitation held me captive. A tremor traced its way up my spine. One part of my mind screamed retreat, urged me to slam the portal shut and flee into the night. But a deeper, more insidious curiosity anchored me. One step. The floor beneath felt solid, concrete perhaps, yet the darkness consumed all light spilling from the corridor. Visibility ceased mere feet ahead. The temperature plunged further, a peculiar pressure building against my eardrums, the suffocating sensation of an unvented chamber. My heart thrashed. Another step. Elias, the whisper coiled right behind my ear, though the air remained undisturbed. My legs trembled, raw instinct clawing its way up, demanding escape. I backed away, fumbling for the knob, until the familiar linoleum of the hallway was underfoot. With the surge of strength, I pulled the door shut, the latch clicking into place. I didn't look back. I sprinted to my office, snatched my belongings with shaking hands, locked the door, and fled the building. The elevator's descent feeling agonizingly slow. Sleep offered little refuge that night, my mind replaying the metallic rasp, the kiss of unnatural cold. The following day, concentration fractured, the memory of the door overshadowing every task. At midday, amidst the bustle of colleagues, I walked the corridor. The wall was seamless, smooth white plaster meeting the gray baseboard exactly as it always had. No trace remained. I stared at the blank space, a phantom chill lingering before turning away. I resolved to stay late again. Big project deadline, I mumbled to inquiring coworkers, forcing a hollow laugh against the tightening vice in my chest as dusk began to bleed through the windows. By 7, the floor had thinned. By 8, only the rhythmic clang of the janitorial cart echoed. By 9, even they had vanished, and the automated lighting system began its nightly call, plunging sections of the hallway into shadow. I sat vigilant in my illuminated office, listening. The building settled into profound quiet. Around 9:30, it returned. Elias, that same grating whisper. My scalp prickled. Shoving my chair back, I rose and moved into the corridor, its partial darkness now a familiar, unsettling shroud. Towards the far end, it waited, the plain metal slab resurrected. My heart gave a heavy thud. Sweat beaded on my palms. Each footfall felt weighted as I approached. Reaching out, my fingers brushed the handle. Cold. And beneath the cold, a faint, inexplicable vibration, like a low hum emanating from within the metal itself. I opened it. The blast of cold air, the wall of darkness within, identical to the night before. This time, I'd brought a flashlight. Its beam pierced the void, revealing a path of smooth, bare concrete stretching away. Stepping inside, I swept the light left and right, searching for walls that never appeared. The space felt impossibly vast, larger than the entire floor plate. With each step, the air grew heavier, my breathing turning shallow, a tightness seizing my chest. A sudden thump behind me made me spin around, heart leaping. The flashlight beam found the faint outline of the door, now closed. Panic flared. I rushed back, twisted the knob. It yielded. Relief washed through me in a dizzying wave. I wasn't trapped. Glancing back into the oppressive dark, I heard it again. Elias. Closer now, resonant. A flutter of pure terror beat against my sternum. What was I doing here? An experiment formed. I stepped out, closed the door firmly, and retreated to my office. Minutes later, I returned. The door remained. I repeated this ritual several times. Open, shine the light into the void, hear the distant scraping summons, close it, retreat. The voice never manifested unless I crossed the threshold. Each time its sound reached me, my throat tightened, my pulse accelerating. Was I losing my mind? I entertained the notion of a complex prank, but the spatial impossibility gnawed at me. 7th floor, exterior wall. Nothing should exist beyond that plaster and insulation except a sheer drop. Yet I stepped into a space that felt boundless. logic fractured against the evidence of my senses. The ensuing nights blurred into a morbid routine. The door became a siren call. I needed to understand. I tried scratching a tiny mark on the wall during the day. By night, the wall was pristine, the door occupying the exact same coordinates. I attempted to wedge it open, returning minutes later to find it firmly shut, the wedge lying inert on the floor. I never witnessed its closure. It simply was closed whenever my gaze left it. One evening, I set my phone to record video, propping it on a ledge across the hall, lens aimed squarely at the phenomenon's location. Hiding in my darkened office, I waited. 9:30 arrived, and with it, the whisper, "Elias." I hurried out, retrieved the phone. The corridor was dim, the door solid and present. Stopping the recording, I played it back. The footage showed an empty, still hallway. Then, precisely around the time I'd heard the call, the image dissolved into digital noise for a single frame. When it cleared, the door was simply there. No transition, no fade, no gradual appearance. Blank wall, then door. Instantaneous. My hands trembled violently, breath coming in ragged gasps. This was real, not hallucination, not a dream. The next night, camera rolling, I went back through the door. I kept the flashlight beam and the phone's lens trained low, on the concrete floor extending into blackness. The air felt viscous, pressing in. My temples throbbed. Elias. The name drifted from the depths ahead, elongated as if stretched across immense distance. I advanced, guided only by the narrow cone of light. Faint scraping sounds accompanied my steps, like something heavy being dragged across the concrete far away. My breath plumed visibly in the beam. The cold was biting now, numbing my fingers clasped around the flashlight. 50 paces, perhaps more, into utter darkness. A weight settled on my shoulders, immense and suffocating. Nerve failed me. My stomach churned, muscles screaming for retreat. I turned. For a heart-stopping second, the doorway wasn't there, just endless black. Then, a sliver of faint light. I scrambled towards it. As I neared, I heard a definitive slam, loud and final. But I reached the handle, twisted. It opened. I stumbled back into the familiar hallway, gasping, drenched in sweat. Later, watching the footage offered few answers. A shaky perspective of endless concrete. The microphone picked up the scraping, a low, sibilant hiss like wind in a tunnel, but captured no image of its source. The space remained stubbornly empty on screen. The recorded voice was faint, distorted, barely a whisper beneath the static. Nothing like the resonant call I heard directly. No figure, no movement, just darkness. Sleep became fragmented. Appetite dwindled. Daylight hours were spent in anxious anticipation of the night. A part of me, the rational part, screamed to stop, to leave it alone. Yet another darker impulse craved answers, an obsessive need to confront the impossible. Subtle shifts began to bleed into the daytime. The corridor near that spot felt persistently cooler, even with the sunlit windows nearby. I casually asked a colleague, Maya, if she felt a draft. A shrug, a negative. Touching the wall where the door materialized, my fingers registered a distinct chill, like the surface of a refrigerator. I started a log. Always between 9:00 and 10 p.m. Always present until I left the building. I suspected it vanished the moment I was gone. One night, I hid in a supply closet across the hall, determined to witness its departure after midnight. By 11, exhaustion and sheer dread overwhelmed me. Emerging, the door was still there. Courage failed me. I left. One evening, I decided it was enough. No more. I would ignore the call. I chained myself to my work, the keyboard clicking a desperate rhythm against the silence. 9:15. Elias. The metallic rasp clawed at the edge of hearing. I clenched the desk edge, knuckles wide. Ignore it. It came again, insistent. My pulse throbbed in my ears, forehead damp. I squeezed my eyes shut, focusing on the drone of the ventilation. Closer now. A tendril of icy air brushed the back of my neck. Hair bristled on my arms. It felt like something stood directly behind my chair. Then, silence. I exhaled, shoulders slumping slightly, but the curiosity, insidious and sharp, returned. It had never felt that close before, never breached the sanctuary of my office. I stood, legs unsteady. Outside my door, the corridor lay submerged in its usual nightly gloom. The door was there, but this time it stood slightly ajar, a thin vertical line of absolute blackness against the gray metal, leaking palpable cold. I moved forward, hesitated, then crept closer. The hinges groaned softly as I pushed it wider. I hadn't brought the flashlight tonight. The sparse overhead lights offered meager purchase against the interior void. A wave of visceral dread washed over me, a primal warning screaming from deep within. Elias. It echoed from the darkness, but altered. Two voices now, dissonant, layered, one atop the other. Adrenaline surged, hot and sharp. My hands shook uncontrollably. Breath hitched, shallow and rapid. The air inside felt impossibly heavy, like sinking through water. One step back, another. I reached out, pulled the door closed with a soft click, turned, walked directly to the elevators and didn't stop until I was out on the street. I haven't opened that door again. It doesn't prevent its nightly return whenever work keeps me past 9. Sometimes, glancing up from my screen, I catch its reflection in the polished floor tiles of the hallway. Sometimes, the whisper finds me. Elias, a faint scratching just beneath the threshold of hearing, almost lost in the building's hum. Sometimes, I feel that impossible cold brush my shoulder, and I spin around to find only empty air. Lately, I leave strictly on time. My manager grumbles about slipping productivity, but the alternative is unthinkable. I need to avoid that corridor after dusk. I've tried explaining, haltingly, to a couple of people. Disbelief is the standard response. I must be tired, mistaken the location of a utility closet. No one else has heard the voice, seen the door. It seems selective, manifesting only for me. The thought chills me more than the draft it emits. Is it tied to me? Does my presence conjure it? I'm writing this because the silence is becoming unbearable. Something resides in that building, an entity absent from any blueprint, unacknowledged by physics. It knows my name. It waits behind its impossible door. It breathes cold down my neck in the darkness. Its motives remain opaque, a question I have no intention of answering directly. For now, avoidance is my only strategy. Leave before 9. Take work home. Keep my head down, walk quickly past that section of hallway. Descending in the elevator, I sometimes feel a phantom chill on my collar, as if the cold air itself is following me. I tell myself it's imagination. How this concludes, I cannot say. The door persists, the voice calls, my refusal holds. Entering that space again feels like courting oblivion. It doesn't belong here. It feels ancient, vast, and utterly indifferent. Stepping across that threshold invites something dreadful. So, I adapt, log off early, gather my keys, pretend the corridor's just a corridor, ride the elevator down, exchange a nod with the night guard, step out into the city air. The tension eases slightly outdoors, the night wind almost warm compared to the tomb-like chill of that impossible room. It haunts my sleep, though, the metal door, perpetually slightly open, revealing that consuming darkness. I wake with my heart hammering, staring at the digital clock's glow. 3 a.m., safe in my apartment. But morning means returning. To the same building, the same hallways, the same blank stretch of wall that might cease to be blank after the sun sets. This is my reality now, unresolved. No neat conclusion, no explanation found. Just the knowledge that some nights, if I linger too long, my name will scrape through the silence, and down the hall, an impossible door will stand open. And beyond it, in the cold, suffocating dark, something waits. If you find yourself alone in the quiet hours, in the echoing spaces of an old building, and a voice you don't recognize whispers your name from the shadows, walk away. Lock the door behind you. Do not investigate. Because some doors, once opened, change everything. Elias entered his house that Tuesday morning, a cordless drill clutched like a talisman, his mind a blueprint of planned renovations. He hadn't anticipated the sudden, unwelcome frisson in his own hallway, but the instant his gaze dropped beneath the aged timber handrail crowning the stairs, equilibrium fractured. There, etched into the shadowed underside, was an anomalous cluster of markings. Crude, yet possessed of a precision that bespoke intent. He folded himself down, thumb smudging away decades of dust, revealing intricate sigils. They belonged to no alphabet he knew, resembling scratches at first glance, yet coalescing into a pattern that whispered of ancient origins, carved by a steady, deliberate hand long ago. A constriction seized his chest. He remained there, hunched by the bottom step, fingers tentatively tracing the glyphs. The wood felt abraded, almost hostile beneath his touch, emitting a faint composite scent of defunct varnish and something indefinably stale. A tremor traced his spine, which he hastily attributed to a draft slicing through an open window somewhere upstairs. Snapping a picture with his phone felt like capturing evidence, a digital anchor against the rising tide of unease. He straightened, setting the drill aside with a soft clatter, and ran his hand along the rest of the banister. Nothing. The visible surfaces were smooth, unremarkable. The spindles stood firm. Some previous occupant's obscure jest, he told himself. Yet the unsettling resonance of those carvings lingered, a dissonant note in the familiar symphony of his home. His agenda for the day was clear. Wrestle loose floorboards into submission on the landing, perhaps mend some fractured drywall. He tried to banish the cryptic inscription, but it clung like a burr to his thoughts. Around noon, pausing for sustenance, he retrieved his phone from the kitchen counter. Zooming in on the captured image, the jagged lines and alien geometry stared back, mocking his ignorance. A strange duality took hold. repulsion tangle with an insistent curiosity, a need to decipher their meaning. A cursory online trawl throwing keywords like arcane symbols under stairs into the digital void yielded only decorative motifs utterly dissimilar. He finished his sandwich mechanically and returned to the rhythm of repair. By late afternoon, fatigue claimed him. He liberated a cold beer from the refrigerator, summoned music to fill the silence, and attempted to unwind. The following morning, the renovation resumed. Ascending towards the second floor, burdened by a box of spare tiles, he paused midway. A susurrus, faint as moth wings against glass, seemed to brush past his ear from behind. He froze on the step, straining to hear. Silence answered. Shaking his head, dismissing it as auditory pareidolia, he continued upward. Later, descending for a tape measure, he reached the bottom step and heard it again, clearer this time, chillingly intimate, like his own name. Elias breathed in a low, resonant tone. The fine hairs on his arms lifted in unison. Fatigue, he muttered inwardly, stress playing tricks, but the phenomenon persisted. Each transit of the staircase became an ordeal, punctuated by faint vocalizations, sometimes indistinct murmurs, other times his name, uttered with an inflection that oscillated between summons and reprimand. A dull, visceral ache began to bloom in his gut whenever he approached the stairs. His palms grew slick, his heart hammered against his ribs. Stress, he insisted silently, the renovation's toll, amplified by the disquieting discovery of the carving. Yet, he couldn't dislodge the pervasive conviction that something was fundamentally wrong, localized to the staircase, perhaps emanating from the handrail itself. Friday evening found him immersed in the flickering catharsis of an old action film. Pausing for snacks, he stepped into the hallway. A distinct chill permeated the air, defying the thermostat's dutiful hum. The staircase appeared unchanged, the familiar gleam of polished wood, the subtle groans underfoot. But the silence felt different, weighted, expectant. He tried to project nonchalance, but as his foot met the first riser, a soft whisper coiled out of the stillness. Indecipherable words, yet the sound carried the unmistakable timbre of a low moan. He stopped dead, breath held captive in his lungs, listening, faintly, distantly, yet seemingly woven into the very grain of the wood, his name repeated. Elias. His heart pounded a frantic rhythm. A swift scan of the hallway revealed only emptiness. Swallowing against a suddenly dry throat, he forced himself upward. Each footfall seemed an intrusion, loud in the oppressive quiet. His shoulders tensed, drawing towards his ears. By the time he reached the landing, his breathing was shallow and rapid, his chest tight. He actively avoided the stairs for the remainder of the night, confining himself to the living room until exhaustion finally drove him towards his bedroom. He ascended rapidly, almost scrambling, feeling simultaneously foolish and cornered by an unseen presence. Sleep offered no respite, fragmented by dreams where his name echoed endlessly through the shadowed hallway. Morning arrived, heralded by a knot of anxiety low in his stomach. To begin his day, he had to confront the staircase. After showering and dressing, he stood at the precipice, gazing down. The wood looked innocuous, the banister merely worn. He could pinpoint the hidden location of the carvings beneath. Exhaling a shaky breath, he began the descent, step by deliberate step. A low murmur surfaced, faint but undeniable, his throat constricted. Halfway down, the murmur elongated into a drawn-out hiss, like escaping steam. He nearly stumbled on the final step, his legs suddenly unreliable. Enough. The thought solidified. He needed to remove the entire handrail, replace it, exorcise this thing. Yet inertia held him fast. A primal part of him whispered that tearing out that specific carved section might rupture something, worsen the affliction. He didn't know what he truly believed, only the visceral dread the symbols inspired, a dread he dared not provoke. He sank onto the couch, staring at the staircase, his mind a frantic maze of possibilities. Auditory hallucinations, old house settling sounds anthropomorphized by a stressed brain. But the way the voice spoke his name felt chillingly personal, sentient, knowing. That thought was the most unwelcome of all. He rummaged through a box of documents inherited with the house, seeking clues in previous owners' records, finding nothing pertinent. Restlessness propelled him to the local hardware store. He'd buy a replacement length of wood for the railing, he decided, armor himself for a potential future confrontation. He navigated the aisles, collecting nails and spackle, mundane anchors in his increasingly strange reality. But standing before the stacks of lumber, his resolve faltered, his hands clenched. A vivid image assaulted him, prying off the old handrail, and a guttural roar erupting from the concealed space beneath the stairs. Nausea twisted his stomach. He left the store empty-handed, the new rail unpurchased. Back within the familiar walls that no longer felt entirely his own, he ate a perfunctory lunch, seeking distraction in other tasks. Patching drywall in the kitchen, replacing a dripping faucet, sweeping construction debris. Yet, each time he passed the hallway entrance, his eyes involuntarily darted towards the stairs. A dull pressure throbbed behind his temples, an insistent need to remain vigilant. Late afternoon shadows began to lengthen, and an errand upstairs became unavoidable. Documents needed from his desk. He approached the staircase with trepidation, one hand trailing against the wall for support. Foot on the first step, then the second. His pulse roared in his ears. 3 steps up, his name breathed again, low and protracted. Elias. He went rigid, skin prickling. Turning back felt like surrender, so he pushed forward, mouth arid, tongue thick. A faint vibration hummed beneath his palm as his hand instinctively sought the banister. Reaching the top, he hurried into the spare room, closing the door firmly behind him. Heart hammering, throat tight. He threw open a window, gulping cool air, trying to dispel the clinging unease. He gathered the necessary papers but lingered, reluctant to face the descent. Eventually, fate and daylight forced his hand. Opening the door, he found the hallway steeped in quietude, the overhead light casting long, dancing shadows on the steps. He swallowed hard and began the downward journey. This time, the voice was undeniably louder, a harsh, sibilant growl shaping his name into something broken, almost menacing. The hairs on his nape prickled. He gripped the handrail for balance, its surface unnaturally cold despite the ambient warmth. He reached the bottom and practically fled into the living room, legs feeling weak. Setting the documents down, he pressed his palms against his face, focusing on the simple act of breathing. The urge to call someone surged, followed immediately by the paralyzing question: who would believe this? He opted for a different approach. Fetching a flashlight and a small sharp chisel from his toolbox, he returned to the foot of the stairs. Kneeling near the site of his initial discovery, he aimed the flashlight's beam onto the cryptic inscriptions. He would test a corner, see how easily the wood yielded. His hand trembled. As the chisel's edge bit lightly into the surface, a faint, scratchy protest emanated from the wood. It felt transgressive, like probing a wound that desperately wished to remain untouched. A powerful wave of revulsion washed over him, urging him to stop. His chest tightened painfully. Leaving the chisel resting against the wood, he scrambled back, retreating to the kitchen to wash his hands as if trying to cleanse himself of the contact. His stomach churned, hunger non-existent. Water felt leaden going down. Closing his eyes, he heard the voice again in his memory, disapproving, accusatory, a warning. His breath hitched. He forced himself to inhale slowly, deliberately. He retrieved a folding chair and positioned it in the hallway, directly facing the staircase. There he sat, elbows on knees, a silent sentinel watching the steps. The house creaked and settled around him. The refrigerator hummed its low thrum. A car whispered past outside. The hallway light flickered once, jarring his already frayed nerves. For perhaps half an hour, he remained, listening intently. The voice withheld itself, yet the air felt thick with unresolved tension, a palpable weight. Finally, drained, he rose and retreated to the living room, seeking refuge in the television's electronic babble. He watched mindless programs until his eyelids grew heavy. Around midnight, he steeled himself for the ascent. This time, silence reigned, yet the sensation of being observed prickled his skin. He moved quickly, nearly stumbling onto the landing in his haste. The whispers did not abate in the following days. Instead, they sharpened, sometimes fragmenting into a low, polyphonic murmuring. The volume ebbed and flowed unpredictably. His nerves were stretched taut. A persistent ache settled in his back, a physical manifestation of constant tension. His appetite waned. The image of the inscription beneath the railing became an obsession. The urge to rip it out warred constantly with the gut-wrenching fear that doing so would unleash something far worse than the current torment. One afternoon, while sanding old paint in the hallway, the voices erupted anew, startling him so badly he dropped the sander. It struck the hardwood floor with a dull thud, leaving a fresh scar. He retrieved the tool, switched it off. The voices subsided to faint whispers. Gritting his teeth, he marched to the stairs, deliberately placing his hand flat on the railing. The wood felt glacial beneath his palm. He forced himself to slide his hand slowly upward, along the banister's length. His chest felt tight, almost incendiary. Hushed speech followed his movement, morphing into what sounded chillingly like angry, rhythmic chanting. He snatched his hand back upon reaching the top, his entire arm trembling violently. He fled straight to his bedroom, locking the door, eyes darting around the suddenly confining space, breath coming in ragged gasps. Help was needed, he knew, but what kind? A contractor wouldn't understand spectral voices. A friend would likely diagnose stress or worse. He glanced at the clock, barely past noon, yet he felt utterly depleted. He lay down, but found no solace in rest. By evening, he decided on a tentative step. He called Leo, an old acquaintance with a penchant for historical oddities and artifacts. He sent the photo of the carving, asking vaguely if it looked familiar. Leo replied non-committally, mentioning something vaguely similar seen once in an antique store, unsure of its meaning. Elias didn't mention the voices, merely feigning curiosity about a possible family crest or archaic code. Disconnecting the call, he noted the advance an hour. Hunger gnawed faintly. He prepared a simple meal in the kitchen, eating in silence, thoughts circling back to the stairs. Would the voices continue to escalate? Did the carving extend further, wrapping around unseen parts of the structure? Restlessness warred with a profound fear of disturbing the wood further. His hand shook as he lifted his fork. Now, night has fallen again. Elias stands in the hallway, gaze fixed on the old handrail. His body is rigid, coiled to spring tight. His heart beats a heavy tattoo against his ribs. The chisel waits in the toolbox, a temptation and a terror. If he tears out this rail, this carved defiance of normalcy, will the voices amplify into a roar, or will they finally cease? Will something else emerge from the violated wood? The questions hang unanswered in the heavy air. He knows he cannot continue like this, perpetually haunted by faint calls each time he traverses the stairs. Yet, the decision paralyzes him. For tonight, he retreats once more. He extinguishes the hallway light, steps into the living room, and sinks onto the couch. The house settles around him with soft creaks and groans. His ears strain, listening for the whisper that may or may not come. Tomorrow, he tells himself, action might be possible. Tomorrow, he might find the courage to dismantle the rail, or perhaps he'll simply endure. But pretending ignorance is no longer an option. He has heard it. It knows his name, and its presence is a constant, chilling weight. He is afraid of breaking the wood, afraid of what might be unleashed, yet equally afraid of living indefinitely under its shadow. For now, he sits, breathing shallowly, listening to the charged silence, knowing something waits, and that sooner or later, a choice must be made. Headlights bloomed in the rear view, twin pinpricks piercing the blizzard's swirling veil. Nothing to it, I reckon, the first time. Just another soul pushing north against the storm's teeth. By the third glance, though, a different kind of cold. One that had nothing to do with the Arctic air bleeding through the cab seals had begun to crystallize along my spine. I was being stalked. Before me, Highway 99 North unspooled like a ribbon of obsidian thrown across a vast churning canvas of white. Behind me, somewhere in that maelstrom, a hunter had found its quarry. Call me Silas. 20 years I've wrestled these 18-wheelers across the continent, seen dawn break over deserts and dusk swallow mountains whole. Road weirdness comes with the territory. But nothing. Not the phantom hitchhikers nor the whispers on the graveyard shift CB channels prepared me for that night. Just another haul, or so it began, a belly full of electronics bound from Tacoma for the frozen promise of Fairbanks. A route etched into my memory like lines on my own palms. The forecast bellowed warnings of a blizzard, a white dragon roaring down from the pole, but I'd gambled on speed, hoping to slip through its claws before they fully closed. Twilight bled into a bruised purple, then surrendered to utter blackness as the mercury plummeted. Snowflakes, tentative at first, began to swarm, thickening into a blinding curtain. Wipers strained against the onslaught, carving frantic arcs across the windshield. The road, save for my rig, was utterly deserted. Everyone else had found sense enough to anchor down. That's when those lights ignited behind me, appearing from nowhere, as if conjured from the storm itself. Just another late runner, I told myself, forcing calm. Someone else trying to beat the weather's full fury. Yet, the minutes stretched, marked only by the rhythmic slap of the wipers and the drone of my engine, and a wrongness settled deep in my gut. The truck astern held its distance with unnerving precision. No attempt to overtake on the brief, clearer stretches. Just those unwavering eyes burning into my mirrors every time my gaze flickered upward. The caffeine jitters couldn't explain this creeping dread, this primal certainty that I was watched. Time to test the waters. On a long, deceptively straight patch of ice-slicked asphalt, I eased back on the throttle, letting my speed bleed off. The headlights behind me dimmed slightly, mirroring my deceleration, maintaining that exact, unnerving interval. My heart kicked against my ribs like a trapped bird. This wasn't road etiquette. This was something else. "All right, Silas," I breathed, the sound loud in the sudden, quiet tension. "Let's see the play." I stomped the accelerator, urging the Kenworth forward, faster than prudence or the treacherous conditions advised. The pursuer matched me, instantly, effortlessly, its lights flaring bright, glued to my tail. Panic began its icy climb up my throat. Who was back there? What game was this? Visions flickered. Hijacking, a lunatic playing chicken with a 40-ton machine. My hand shot to the CB, thumb pressing the transmit button. Static answered, thick and impenetrable. The storm's interference strangling any plea for help. Utterly alone. The snow fell with vengeful intensity now, visibility shrinking to mere feet. The world beyond my headlights was an abstract chaos of white. Turn-offs, safe havens, rest stops, swallowed by the blizzard. My only option, drive. Keep moving, keep hoping to outrun, outlast, whatever nameless thing clung to my wake. Hours felt like they'd bled away, yet the dashboard clock insisted barely 45 minutes had passed since the Phantom first appeared. My knuckles were bone white, clenched around the wheel. My vision a frantic pendulum swing between the swirling vortex ahead and the damning glare behind. Then, abruptly, silence shattered. An engine roared deeper than my own, and the following truck surged forward. It drew level, its hulking form momentarily framed in my side window. An older model Peterbilt, maybe, its paint a ghostly, indeterminate gray beneath layers of road grime and ice. But it wasn't the truck that froze the blood in my veins. It was the cab, empty, utterly, impossibly vacant. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, convinced exhaustion and fear were conjuring phantoms. Looked again. Nothing. No silhouette, no shadow, just an empty captain's chair behind the wheel. The truck was driving itself, holding perfect formation beside me on the treacherous, ice-kissed road. Terror, stark and absolute, seized me. This defied reason, defied everything I knew about metal and mechanics in the solid, unforgiving world. Trucks didn't pilot themselves through blizzards in the godforsaken wilderness. My sanity frayed. Before the sheer impossibility could fully register, the Spectre rig swerved, its massive grille lunging towards my cab. Instinct took over. I wrenched the wheel, a violent, desperate countermove. My trailer slewed wildly, a terrifying fishtail that threatened to fold the entire rig in half. For one heart-stopping second, I felt the point of no return rushing up, the sickening lurch of impending jackknife. Somehow, wrestling the wheel, I pulled it back from the brink. But the rules had changed. This wasn't pursuit anymore. This entity, this thing, was actively trying to murder me. I pushed my engine until it screamed, demanding every ounce of power, flying down the highway at speeds that flirted with suicide. The phantom hauler paced me with chilling ease, periodically surging alongside, attempting to shoulder me into the oblivion bordering the road. Each time, a frantic swerve, a prayer muttered through gritted teeth, bought me moments. But the fuel gauge dipped, my nerves shredded, my endurance waned. My mind scrabbled for an escape, a strategy, anything. A town, a patrol car, a logging camp. Surely something lay ahead. But the snow-choked windshield revealed only endless night, endless road. Rounding a wide, sweeping curve, my high beams sliced through the whiteout, illuminating a structure ahead. A bridge. A steel skeleton vaulting across a ravine whose bottom was lost to darkness and swirling snow. An idea sparked, born of desperation, fueled by terror, lethally dangerous. But it was all I had. I feathered the brakes, just enough, a calculated invitation. The Spectre rig slid smoothly alongside, taking the bait. As our cabs aligned, precisely as we hit the bridge's icy expanse, I slammed my brakes with everything I had and simultaneously cranked the wheel hard right. My truck screamed, skidding sideways, the trailer instantly jackknifing, forming a brutal V. A bone-jarring impact threw me against the door as the Phantom slammed into my trailer's flank. For a dizzying moment, we were locked, a tangle of metal sliding across the bridge deck like skaters on a frozen pond. Then, with a shriek of tortured steel, the Phantom broke away. I watched, transfixed, in my side mirror as it careened sideways, unable to correct, and plunged over the bridge railing, vanishing into the black, snow-filled abyss. My own rig shuddered to a halt, the cab hanging halfway over the precipice, the chasm yawning beneath my door. Silence descended, broken only by the wind's howl and my own ragged, painful breaths. My hands trembled uncontrollably on the wheel. Minutes passed before courage, or perhaps morbid curiosity, allowed me to crack the door and peer down. Nothing. No twisted wreckage, no fire, no disturbed snowdrifts in the valley far below. It was as if the truck, the chase, the collision had simply evaporated into the storm. As if it had never been. How long I sat there, perched between the highway and the void, I couldn't say. Eventually, the adrenaline subsided enough for me to cautiously back the Kenworth fully onto the bridge, the damaged trailer groaning in protest. I continued my journey north. The blizzard, its fury spent, dissipated as suddenly as it had arrived, unveiling a sky brittle with stars. When I finally rolled into Fairbanks, half a day late, the thought of reporting the incident felt absurd. A ghost truck? Self-piloted? intent on murder. They'd call me drunk, sleep-deprived, or plain unhinged. So I delivered the cargo, filed a vague report about treacherous conditions causing damage, and tried to bury the memory deep. But the image remains seared onto my mind. Those twin lights burning holes in my rear view, the horrifying emptiness of that driver's seat. I still run that northern route, and every time the snow begins to fall, every time the darkness feels absolute, I find my eyes flicking to the mirrors more often, my grip tightening on a wheel. Because out there, on those desolate stretches where civilization feels like a distant rumor and storms are born from the breath of glaciers, the impossible feels terribly close. Sometimes, late at night, I catch a glimpse of headlights pacing me, just a little too steady, a little too close. When that happens, I push the engine a little harder. I pray a little louder. I drive. Because I learned the truth that night. The roads we think we know aren't always empty. Not all the predators out there operate by rules we understand. So, if you find yourself on a lonely highway deep in the night, and a pair of headlights fixes itself in your mirror, holding distance with unnatural patience, don't dismiss it. It might be more than just another driver. It might be something else, something that haunts the frozen arteries of the North. And if you see it, drive fast, drive smart, and for God's sake, don't try to see who's driving. Some voids, once glimpsed, are never truly empty again. That phantom hauler is always out there, waiting on the endless highways of the night. The first instance, my car keys gleaming frostily from the butter compartment, I chalked up to a mundane aberration, the sort of synaptic misfire that punctuates an overburdened life. But when Grandmother Iris's locket, a fragile gold heart kept sacrosanct, surfaced amidst the brittle flakes of my morning cereal, I understood. An unseen, insidious choreography was unfolding within my own walls. It began with whispers of displacement, not shouts. A lifelong tendency towards the scatterbrained had always served as a convenient excuse. So, the morning my phone materialized inside the bathroom vanity, nestled amongst spare soaps, elicited little more than a self-deprecating sigh. Forgetfulness, my old familiar. Yet, as weeks bled into one another, these domestic quirks intensified, acquiring a bizarre, almost deliberate character. My wristwatch took up residence in the flower canister, emerging powdered like a ghost. Earrings, precisely positioned on the nightstand the evening prior, reappeared deep within the pocket of a seldom-worn winter coat. My laptop, eternally tethered to its desk-bound existence, inexplicably journeyed to the cool, scented darkness of the linen closet. Initially, reason strained to impose order. Perhaps stress, that silent saboteur, was guiding my hands in unconscious acts of relocation. I took to littering the apartment with reminders, striving for a conscious placement of every object. The effort proved futile. The locket incident shattered my fragile rationalizations. It was more than a keepsake. It was an anchor to memory, cherished, rarely touched, guarded in its velvet box upon my dresser. That morning, the unexpected clink against porcelain as I poured my breakfast was alien. And there it lay, gold gleaming against processed grain. My spoon hung suspended, a pendulum marking a moment of profound dislocation. No, absolutely not. I could not have placed it there. A glacial disquiet bloomed in my stomach. This was not absent-mindedness. This was intrusion. A meticulous chronicle commenced, a logbook charting the chaotic pilgrimage of my possessions. What artifact vanished, where it resurfaced, each entry a testament to the baffling lack of pattern. A paperback I'd been immersed in materialized in the freezer, its pages stiff with cold. My toothbrush sprouted unnervingly from the soil of a potted fern. The spare house key, tucked away in a specific drawer, was discovered dangling like a strange fruit from the shower head. Sleep became a forgotten luxury, replaced by strained vigils in the dark, parsing every creak and settling sigh of the house. Daylight hours were fractured by anxiety, a relentless cycle of checking, confirming, reconfirming the location of my belongings. Security cameras were installed, silent digital eyes meant to capture the culprit. The footage yielded only frustration. Objects vanished and reappeared between frames, teleporting without visible agency, mocking the very notion of surveillance. Desperation frayed my composure. I unburdened myself to Maya, my voice thin and reedy, vibrating with the accumulated tension of sleepless weeks. She listened, her expression a study in patient concern. When the torrent of my paranoia subsided, she paused, then offered gently, "Have you ever thought that maybe you're doing this yourself?" The question hung in the air, incomprehensible. "What are you saying?" She spoke of dissociative states, of actions performed in a fugue, leaving no trace in conscious memory, often triggered by immense stress or buried trauma. The suggestion felt like a betrayal, an internal coup. Yet, beneath the immediate rejection, a cold seed of doubt took root. Was my own mind the architect of this bewildering chaos? Uncertainty gnawed. I sought the sterile sanctuary of professional assessment. The psychiatrist, her face impassive, absorbed my narrative, her questions probing stress levels, sleep architecture, familial histories of mental instability. Her verdict remained shrouded in ambiguity. While not dismissing the possibility of a dissociative fissure, she seemed unconvinced it encompassed the sheer strangeness of the phenomenon. Anti-anxiety medication was prescribed, a journal suggested for tracking daily minutiae. The pills granted slumber, but the domestic ballet continued unabated, perhaps even emboldened. I'd awaken to find my shoes standing sentinel in the bathtub's porcelain basin, or discover my pins meticulously arranged in a perfect circle upon the kitchen linoleum. My own home began to feel like alien territory, each room a potential hiding place, each surface suspect. Searching for necessities became an exhausting ritual, culminating in discoveries that defied logic. The relentless confusion and fear carved their presence onto my physique. Weight sloughed off, unease consuming appetite, dark, bruised crescents blooming beneath my eyes from nights spent listening to the house breathe around me. Concern rippled through my circle of friends, my family. Offers were extended. Stay with us, escape the locus of these disturbances, but an obstinate conviction held me captive. Leaving felt like surrender, like forfeiting the chance to witness the mechanism behind the madness. I escalated my countermeasures. More cameras, motion detectors sensitive to the slightest stir, even a fine layer of flour dusted across thresholds, hoping for spectral footprints. Each measure was met with silent circumvention. The flower lay undisturbed, sensors remained dormant, yet the impossible migration of objects persisted. One night, roughly 3 months into this wakened nightmare, I jolted awake. Not to a sound, but to a profound shift in the atmosphere, a static charge in the utter stillness. Heart hammering against my ribs, I crept from bed towards the living room. The sight that greeted me fractured my understanding of reality. Every movable object, books, ceramics, cushions, even the smaller tables, hovered silently, suspended a meter above the floorboards. As I stood paralyzed, they commenced a slow, lazy rotation, caught in an invisible, silent maelstrom. My mind scrambled, grasping for explanations, finding none. This was not physics. This was something else. Then, as abruptly as it began, gravity reasserted its dominion. Objects plummeted, landing with a discordant symphony of thuds, clatters, and bumps. By the time my trembling fingers found the light switch, the room presented a facade of perfect normalcy, albeit slightly rearranged. I sank to the carpet, legs refusing further service. A dream? Hallucination? Or had the veil finally thinned, revealing the force orchestrating this domestic haunting? The ensuing days were a pendulum swing between conviction and self-doubt. I trawled the phosphorescent depths of the internet, seeking echoes of my experience in forums dedicated to the uncanny. Some narratives resonated with chilling familiarity. Others dissolved into absurdity, even by my newly skewed standards. The idea of inviting mediums or paranormal investigators flickered, but apprehension held me back. Fear of dismissal, certainly, but also a deeper trepidation of what they might genuinely uncover. As weeks ripened into months, a peculiar equilibrium began to establish itself. The relocations persisted, but their power to incite terror waned, replaced by a strange, almost detached curiosity. Where would the misplaced item surface next? I began leaving small tokens, coins, paper clips, buttons, on tables, like tentative offerings to the unseen presence. Sometimes they vanished, reappearing days later in unexpected configurations. Other times, they were left untouched or arranged into intricate, meaningless patterns. My friends, witnessing my shift from raw fear to a kind of wry bemusement, relaxed their vigil. Jokes surfaced about my personal poltergeist, my erratic house sprite. A definitive explanation never materialized. The phenomenon eventually faded, the strange migration slowing to a trickle, then ceasing altogether, as inexplicably as they had begun. Yet, the experience etched itself onto my perception. To this day, a heightened awareness dictates my movements. I place things down with deliberation, half expecting them to embark on journeys of their own. A habit formed, murmuring thanks to the house when an object remains steadfastly where it was left, offering a rueful chuckle when something innocuous turns up wildly out of place. Ultimately, I've chosen to reframe those bewildering months not as an ordeal, but as a stark lesson in the vastness of our ignorance. The universe hums with mysteries that mock explanation, forces operating just beyond the veil of the mundane. Sometimes these forces ripple into our lives in the quietest ways. Car keys finding refuge amongst the cold cuts, a beloved locket nestled in breakfast cereal. we choose whether to recoil in fear or to acknowledge the strange, intricate weave of existence. I find I prefer to embrace the weird. It makes for a far more interesting tapestry. The memory clings sharp as broken glass of the night that phantom hiss first coiled around the silence. It was deep night, the hour when the city holds its breath, perhaps well past the threshold of midnight. Street lamps cast a sickly, intermittent glow, their bulbs flickering like dying heartbeats. I was adrift on the pavement, returning from Mateo's apartment, thoughts amorphous and unimportant, simply walking. Then I drew level with the husk of the old terminus. Years it had stood derelict, a casualty of civic ledger balancing or some arcane zoning dispute. A cage of chain link hemmed it in, festooned with faded warnings against trespass, though no guardian ever paced its perimeter. Only darkness, stillness, and the scrawled hieroglyphs of graffiti claimed dominion. Or so I believed, until that particular night. A protracted, metallic groan sliced the quiet, the unmistakable protest of heavy brakes, the kind a weary transport might make exhaling at rout's end. Instinctively, my eyes scanned the asphalt ribbon for the glare of headlamps, the ruby punctuation of tail lights. Nothing. The street lay utterly deserted, void of vehicles, devoid of souls, leaving only the faint, sibilant echo dissolving into the gloom. A knot of ice formed low in my gut. Autumn hadn't yet fully turned, yet my fingers began to tremble uncontrollably. Imagination, I chided myself, forcing my steps onward, trying to herd my thoughts toward mundane shores. But the conviction lingered, cold and certain. Something unseen shared the night. Subsequent evenings found me tracing altered paths homeward, deliberately circumventing that desolate block and its spectral acoustics. Yet, eventually, a perverse curiosity gnawed through my resolve. Why? Perhaps to confront the phantom, perhaps merely to reassure myself of my own sanity. So I returned. Same hour, same trajectory, positioning myself across the street where the pavement crumbled at the edge of the station's blighted property. It loomed unchanged. Windows like shattered eyes, schedule boards ripped and illegible, rows of vacant benches veiled in dust and brittle, forgotten newsprint. I stood sentinel, waiting for a sign. 10 minutes bled into 15. The only sound was the tide of my own respiration as I wrestled impatience, battled the rising conviction that this was folly. Then it came, a sharp expulsion, like the release of immense pressure. It began as a whisper, swelling rapidly in volume. My pulse erupted into a frantic drumbeat against my ribs. Again, I searched the street, left, then right. Not a glimmer of light. The blood roared in my ears. Suddenly, a fleeting pulse of illumination pricked the distance, too frail for a proper headlight, more akin to the expiring gasp of a torch beam. It emanated from deeper within the grounds, beyond the fence, near the derelict lanes where coaches once navigated. I edged closer, gaze fixed on the source. The light blinked anew, a hesitant signal. Another hiss followed, louder this time. Perspiration slicked my palms, my throat constricted. That faint luminescence, coupled with a pneumatic sigh, evoked the chilling impression of an old leviathan attempting arrival. A vast shape concealed in shadow, yearning to complete its spectral circuit. Yet my eyes perceived only the empty, cracked driveway, strewn with glittering shards of glass. Wheeling around, I retreated homeward, mind churning. Sleep a distant country I reached only briefly before waking drenched in cold sweat. The following day, I recounted the experience to Elias, a colleague. His laughter was dismissive. My imagination, he declared, was running riot. Perhaps he held the truth of it, yet the feeling persisted, tenacious and unsettling, a sense that threads remained untangled. Over the ensuing week, the station became a locus, an unhealthy fixation. My shift would end, a hasty meal consumed, and then my feet would inevitably carry me back towards that dilapidated structure. Each visit yielded the same phantasmal sound, sometimes abrupt, other times a long, mournful exhalation. Sporadically, the weak light would flicker. One night, I could have sworn I glimpsed a silhouette near the station's far corner, obscured behind a fractured pane of glass. It shifted with unnatural speed, then vanished. Though the sighting was fleeting, the impression was potent. Someone watched from within. A visceral instinct screamed caution, urged me to cease this nocturnal pilgrimage. It offered no solace, only mounting dread. Yet I couldn't disengage. An insistent need to know propelled me. I began circumnavigating the perimeter fence, probing for weaknesses, a potential ingress. The main gate remained steadfast, its chain thick with rust. The fence itself stood tall, crowned with cruel loops of barbed wire. I located sections where the mesh sagged, but none offered passage without the promise of torn flesh. The station building projected an aura of grime and neglect. Its interior was mostly swallowed by darkness, though occasionally a faint, inconsistent flicker suggested a fluorescent tube clinging to life. An impossibility, given the city had severed all utilities years prior. One evening, the air itself felt charged, thick with an oppressive imminence. An overcast sky muted the already struggling streetlights. Positioned near the fence, I scanned the lot. The hiss erupted, so sudden and proximate it felt inches behind me. I recoiled, nearly fumbling my phone. A frantic pivot revealed nothing but empty sidewalk. My chest tightened. The urge to flee warred with a leaden paralysis in my limbs. Then, movement caught my eye. A flicker of light on the station's far side where the buses would have docked. It pulsed erratically like a dying strobe. Drawn to spot myself, I approached the main gate, rattling the unyielding chain. Peering through the diamond-shaped gaps, I discerned an outline against the deeper shadows, something vast, indistinct, yet undeniably possessing the bulk of a bus. I blinked, questioning my vision, but the shape remained static, devoid of detail, yet too large for any ordinary vehicle. I stood, transfixed for what felt like minutes, heart slamming against my sternum. Then, as if a switch were thrown, the shape dissolved. The lot plunged back into near-total darkness, save for a single faltering bulb near a station doorway. A scraping noise followed, metal dragged across concrete. That was my breaking point. Retreating quickly, my walk escalated to a near run until I reached the relative safety of a better-lit avenue, pulse still racing, skin clammy. The desperate need for home, for locked doors, consumed me. Yet, the very next day, the pull returned, irresistible as gravity. It felt perverse, this yearning, an unscratched itch deep beneath the skin. I maintained a greater distance this time, observing from halfway down the block. The street slumbered. Stray cats scavenged near a shuttered diner. My own breathing sounded unnaturally loud in the quiet, and then, inevitably, the hiss ripped through the stillness. Simultaneously, a dull luminescence bloomed on the ground near the station's entrance. It pulsed twice, then expired. Adrenaline surged through me, hot and sharp. My mouth turned to dust. The station seemed to emanate a silent summons, its purpose obscure, its allure undeniable. As weeks bled into one another, new graffiti began to appear on the station walls. Stark words, unfamiliar symbols slashed onto the brickwork with aggressive strokes. Fresh carpets of shattered glass glittered in certain areas, suggesting nocturnal destruction. Faint footprints sometimes marred the dust near the old waiting room entrance, yet I never witnessed a living soul within. I tried confiding in Amara, describing the lights, the sounds. She suggested vagrants squatting amidst the decay, perhaps tinkering with residual machinery. But the hiss possessed a disturbing regularity, a precision that defied randomness. It occurred around the same time each night, its duration consistent, invariably accompanied by that spectral flash. This wasn't chaos. It felt choreographed, like a timetable adhered to by ghosts. One night, emboldened, I brought a compact flashlight, reasoning I might penetrate the gloom through the broken windows. My hand trembled as I approached the fence line, phone camera poised but unused. I waited, breath held, for the signature sound. Minutes stretched, then it arrived. I thumbed the flashlight on, directing its beam through a sizable void in the chain link. The cone of light swept across an interior landscape of ruin. Ticket counters shrouded in grime, the floor littered with concrete chunks fallen from the ceiling. Then the beam snagged on something in the far corner, the unmistakable front grille of an archaic bus, its emblem obscured by rust and dents. For a heart-stopping instant, I imagined its headlights reflecting my beam, but they were dull, lifeless, like painted-over eyes. Shifting the light fractionally leftward, I registered it. A figure silhouetted in a seat, visible through a fractured panel on the bus itself. Motionless, featureless. My breathing grew shallow, ragged. The flashlight beam jittered violently, mirroring the tremor in my hand. A sharp click, like an electrical short, echoed nearby. My flashlight died. Frantic toggling yielded nothing. My phone screen flickered, the battery icon blinking red despite showing 70% charge moments before leaving home. I stumbled back a few paces. As I did, the light inside the station convulsed. A bright, spastic flickering, like a fluorescent tube surrendering. It strobed wildly for several seconds, making shadows leap and distort. My nerves frayed. A cramp seized my stomach. My heart felt like a frantic bird trapped in my ribs. Then the internal flashing ceased. Absolute darkness reclaimed the space. A low scraping sound followed, suggestive of heavy tires turning on gritty concrete. My courage evaporated. I fled, not daring a backward glance. This harrowing pattern persisted for weeks. With each encounter, my anxiety ratcheted higher, my body perpetually braced for confrontation. Sleep became a luxury, haunted by recurring visions. The silhouette, the rusted metal maw, the epileptic lights. Doubts surfaced. Was I succumbing to delusion? Yet the visceral certainty remained. What I saw was real. It was there. One evening, I altered my approach, utilizing a narrow alley flanking the block, affording a different perspective on the property. There, I discovered it. A corroded side door, wrenched partially from its hinges, clearly forced. A jolt, potent and terrifying, shot through me. This was it, the chance to finally breach the interior. My chest constricted, legs taut with apprehension, yet I pressed onward. After ensuring the alley was deserted, I slipped into the narrow passage. The stench hit me first. Stale urine, decaying refuse. Shielding my nose with my sleeve, I navigated past splintered pallets. The violated door opened onto a cramped corridor, likely once reserved for staff. Darkness reigned. The floor a treacherous carpet of broken glass and crumbled plaster. My phone's flashlight, dimmed low, cut a tentative path. Every footstep crunched, amplifying the oppressive silence. At the corridor's end, another door stood ajar, offering a glimpse into the main terminal. Rows of bolted plastic seats, many fractured, marched across the grimy floor. An overturned vending machine lay like a fallen robot. The air hung thick and stagnant, the scent of long-sealed decay. I crept toward the opening, sweeping the light across the desolation. My heart hammered against my ribs, threatening to burst. Then came the hiss, shockingly close, directly to my left. I swung the phone light around. There, etched onto the floor, was what looked chillingly like an old tire track, curving inward from deeper within the station's bowels. A corridor to the left, presumably leading to the bus bays. The hiss repeated, wetter this time like air leaking from a punctured hose. Trembling violently, I advanced, following the sound past rows of rusted lockers and a faded employees-only sign. Beyond this hallway lay a wide set of rolling metal doors, the kind designed for vehicle entry. They were partially raised, suspended perhaps 3 feet above the concrete floor. Crouching low, I aimed my light into the gap beneath. And I saw them. Wheels. Thick, heavy-duty wheels caked in ancient grime, unmistakably belonging to a bus that hadn't tasted open road in decades. I strained to adjust my angle, desperate for a clearer view, but the opening was too restrictive. My pulse throbbed in my temples, sweat trickled down my face. The hiss sounded again, accompanied by a brief flicker of light from beneath the unseen chassis, casting fleeting skeletal shadows from the wheels. I was frozen, locked in place, chest aching with the effort to breathe. Suddenly, one of the massive wheels shifted, perhaps only an inch, but undeniable movement. A dull thud resonated, followed by profound silence. The flicker beneath vanished. My phone began vibrating erratically in my grasp, despite being set to silent. The screen went black, then relit, displaying a critical 5% battery. Impossible. It had been nearly full upon entering the alley. That was the final impetus. Primal instinct screamed, "Escape." I scrambled backward, abandoning stealth, legs weak and unreliable. Reaching the corridor back to the forced side door, I broke into a desperate sprint, heedless of the noise. My breath tore in ragged gasps. I burst out into the alley, the phone dying completely as I emerged. The night air felt glacial against my sweat-soaked skin. I didn't stop running until I reached the reassuring glow of a Main Street corner. For a time, I stayed away. Yet, even in my absence, a strange magnetism persisted, an inexplicable longing. Part of me, the reckless, curious part, yearned to return, to see if the spectral bus would fully manifest, to grasp the enigma haunting that decaying terminal. Each sunset brought thoughts of the hiss, the lights, the rusted grill. They felt less like warnings now, more like invitations to take a seat on that broken-down phantom. Rationality cautioned against it, labeled it perilous, perhaps impossible. But my body still reacted viscerally to any similar sound drifting on the night air. Now I find myself walking those familiar streets aimlessly, wandering until exhaustion claims my legs. Inevitably, my gaze drifts toward the derelict station, perpetually scanning for that telltale glow, that sibilant exhalation, the sign that something is about to arrive. The chain link still stands sentinel, the barbed wire still glints menacingly atop it. But I know about the breach, the violated door round the side. I know the way in, and honesty compels me to admit a part of me wants to use it. Every time I pass, my heart accelerates. I half expect to see headlamps sweep around the corner, followed by the tortured squeal of tires and that final, definitive release of compressed air. It never fully materializes, yet the portents remain. The graffiti morphs, the lights pulse erratically, the station endures in its vacant state. Still, the conviction holds. Something waits behind those shattered windows, observing, quietly, forever poised to issue its hiss. A warning, or perhaps a welcome. I don't know how much longer my resistance will hold. Each night, I linger a moment more, straining to hear the ghost of brakes that never quite engage. One part of me recognizes the folly, the danger in tempting fate, but another, deeper part feels irrevocably drawn, compelled to discover if that bus will ever truly pull in, if its door will sigh open, if the urge to climb aboard will become overwhelming. Thus far, it remains tantalizingly out of reach. But every night, the prickling dread in my gut, the cold sweat on my neck, confirms its presence, its patient vigil, and I cannot swear I won't eventually step across the threshold. Perhaps, deep down, I already know I will. It wasn't the ragged breath or the stumbling gait that seized my attention first, but the crimson, dark, almost black under his fingernails, a grotesque smear across the tattered fabric clinging to his chest, tangled like burrs in the wild thatch of his hair. He lurched into the clearing of our camp as twilight bled across the sky, his gaze vacant, words tumbling incoherently from his lips, fragments about being swallowed by the woods. In that suspended moment, my wife Alara immobile, the children hushed statues beside her. I had no inkling that this apparition's arrival heralded the brutal end of tranquility, the beginning of a scramble for survival. Months of anticipation had culminated in this escape to the high Cascades. For Alara and me, for young Leo, already 13 and straddling childhood's edge, and bright-eyed Maya, just 10, it was meant to be sanctuary. A week unplugged, woven together by shared trails, the quiet patience of fishing, the flickering theater of campfire tales. 3 days unfolded like a dream, sun-dappled hikes, the silver flash of trout, marshmallows toasted to perfection under a canopy of stars. Then came the fourth dusk, and the dream fractured. Embers glowed as I coaxed the fire, Alara humming softly over the camp stove. Leo and Maya were engrossed in some whispered card game conspiracy nearby. A sudden thrashing in the dense rhododendrons bordering our sight sent my hand reflexively to the canister of bear deterrent. An animal, I assumed, deer, perhaps, or the less welcome bulk of a bear. But what staggered from the foliage was no creature of the woods I knew. It was him, the blood-marked man, looking sculpted from nightmare. "Help me." The word scraped raw from his throat as he stumbled toward the firelight. Lost. Elara inhaled sharply, drawing the children into the circle of her arms like a hen shielding her chicks. I rose, measured, the cold weight of the bear spray familiar in my palm. "Easy there." I pitched my voice low, striving for a calm I didn't feel. "Are you injured? What happened?" His head thrashed, a frantic, negative, tangled hair whipping his face. Days, wandering, the path, gone. As he drew nearer, the stains resolved undeniably into dried blood, not trail dust. A primitive drumbeat started in my chest, but for my family, I projected steadiness. "All right, let's get you seated. Some water." I gestured toward an empty camp chair, a placating motion. He slumped into the offered chair with unnerving gratitude. Elara, face a mask of tension, passed me a water bottle. He seized it, draining it in desperate, noisy gulps, water mingling with saliva on his chin. "Your name?" I asked when he paused for breath. "Silas," came the hoarse reply. "Silas Vane." "Silas, tell us how you came to be out here alone." His eyes skittered, restless birds unable to perch, never meeting ours. "Hiking," he mumbled, the word chewed. "Friends, we split up, trail vanished, so long." The story felt thin, threadbare. Days lost in these popular ranges? Where were the SAR teams, the echo and chop of helicopters? And the blood, if not his own, then whose? A silent question passed between Elara and me. Her slight, affirming nod confirmed our shared unease. "Keep the children close." "Silas," I began, choosing my words with care, "we carry a satellite phone. We can contact the Rangers, get help dispatched." The suggestion detonated something within him. The vacancy in his eyes vanished, replaced by a sharp, feral alertness that iced my veins. "No!" The word ripped out, raw and loud, as he sprang from the chair with startling speed. "No calls. Don't let them find me." Leo flinched. Maya made a small, frightened sound, burrowing against Elara. I moved instinctively, putting myself between my family and this sudden eruption. "Find you?" I kept my tone level, a difficult feat. "Who are you afraid of, Silas?" His gaze swept the encroaching shadows, frantic. "Them," he hissed, conspiratorial, terrified, the ones, touched by the change, they hunt. A cold knot tightened in my gut. This wasn't just lost, this was fractured, dangerous. We were isolated, utterly vulnerable. "All right, Silas," I soothed, playing for time. "No calls, just relax now. We'll figure it out." He wavered, sinking slightly, a flicker of compliance. Then Maya, her voice small but clear in the tense silence, asked the question hanging heavy in the air. "Papa, why does he have red on him?" Silas's head snapped toward her, eyes blazing. "Red?" he echoed, a low growl. "Yes, the blood. Fought them. They wanted me, but I stopped them. I won." He surged to his feet again, fists working rhythmically at his sides. In my periphery, I saw Lara subtly guiding the children back, inch by inch, toward the tent's flimsy sanctuary. Silas, I tried, desperate to regain his focus. Who are these others you fought? But his attention was snared, locked onto Maya with an intensity that turned my blood cold. Untouched, he murmured, a strange reverence in his tone. Still pure. They haven't marked her yet. That chilling murmur snapped the last thread of restraint. The bear spray came up, a single fluid motion, and I triggered it, bathing his face in the acrid orange cloud. His shriek was inhuman, a tearing sound ripped from tortured lungs as he clawed blindly at his eyes. "Elira, the car, now!" She reacted instantly, a blur of motion scooping Maya, hauling Leo by the arm, sprinting for the dark bulk of the SUV parked just beyond the firelight. I backpedaled, a desperate rear guard, keeping my body between the shrieking man and my fleeing family. Blinded, choking, Silas possessed an unnerving strength. He lunged, a wild tackle fueled by madness, sending us both sprawling into the dirt and pine needles. We wrestled, his fingers like talons scrabbling for my eyes, his breath hot and foul. "It's coming," he roared, spittle flying. "You can't escape the change." Adrenaline surged. A desperate heave, a knee driven hard into his gut, gave me precious seconds. I scrambled free, sprinting, lungs burning, not daring a backward glance. I flung myself into the passenger seat as Alara slammed the gear shift, the engine roaring to life. "Drive! Drive!" The SUV lurched, tires spinning on the loose track, fishtailing wildly before finding purchase. In the side mirror's fleeting glimpse, a silhouette, Silas, scrambled after us, moving with a terrifying, unnatural swiftness through the deepening gloom. Trees became indistinct smears as Alara wrestled the wheel, her breath coming in ragged gasps, the children's terrified sobs filling the small space. "Papa, who was that?" Leo's voice trembled from the back seat. "Just someone lost, son," I lied, my voice tight, trying to project a calm utterly absent within me. "We're safe, it's over." But the assertion felt hollow. Silas Vane's blood-rimmed eyes, the crimson stains, his fevered pronouncements about a change, these images were branded onto my memory. We drove relentlessly, chasing the distant promise of streetlights, finally spilling our fractured story under the harsh, fluorescent glare of a small-town sheriff's office. Hours blurred into a haze of questions and descriptions. Patrols were dispatched. They found our campsite ravaged, the tent slashed, unsettling symbols daubed in what looked chillingly like blood onto the surrounding pines. Silas Vane himself had vanished as if the forest floor had swallowed him whole. We tell ourselves it was an isolated incident, a terrifying brush with a man unhinged by solitude or substance. We try to bury the memory. Yet the Cascades no longer call to us. The children claim they've outgrown camping, but Alara and I know the truth. The wild, once our refuge, now whispers of that night. Sometimes, when the wind moans around the eaves and darkness presses close against the glass, Silas Vane's words resurface. The change is coming. Was he merely mad, or was he a harbinger? I find myself scanning the tree line at the edge of the yard. listening for a frantic rustle in the leaves, half convinced that something watches, waits, and wonders when the hunt might resume. The wilderness beckoned, a siren song promising escape. For me, Elias, my brother Ronan, and our companions, Cale and Finn. We'd shouldered our burdens, canvas, cookpots, the weight of expectation, hungry for a weekend steeped in nature's deep silence, far from the city's relentless static, the incessant hum of connection we craved to sever. This excursion was different. Ronan, guided by whispers on some obscure digital forum, had found a place deeper, more isolated, untouched by the casual wanderer. Precisely the untrodden sanctuary we sought. Our journey snaked through interminable mountain passes, asphalt ribbons clinging precariously to ancient slopes. When the engine finally sighed into silence at the trailhead, the air struck sharp as frosted glass, thick with the resinous perfume of pine. No signal bars, no glint of another vehicle. Only us, swallowed by the woods. Perfection. For an hour, perhaps more, we trod the narrow path, boots chewing the trail, banter echoing lightly beneath the dense canopy. The release was palpable, a shedding of urban skin. The path eventually yielded, unfurling into a modest clearing ringed by colossal trees, arboreal giants standing sentinel. Nearby, a creek offered its liquid murmur, a counterpoint to the profound quiet. Tents rose like colorful mushrooms. Wood was gathered for the evening's heart, and we surrendered to the anticipated calm of a night beneath a ceiling of stars. As twilight bled saffron and violet across the sky, we clustered near the fire's nascent dance, charring marshmallows, words spooling out easily, weaving tales of consequence and none. Darkness fell swiftly, a velvet shroud punctured only by the fire's capricious light and the distant, indifferent glitter of stars. It was a silence unknown in the city, a profound stillness that bordered on the unnerving. At some juncture, Ronan rose, murmuring something about investigating the creek's edge. His absence was brief, yet he returned with something unsettled in his gaze, his face shadowed by more than the firelight. "Elias? Anyone?" His voice was pitched low, tight. "Did any of you wander down by the water?" Denials rippled through our small circle. The creek had remained untouched since our arrival. "There are prints," Ronan stated, his eyes probing the impenetrable blackness beyond our flickering haven. "Big ones." My first instinct was suspicion, a jest, perhaps, prelude to some manufactured fright. But the rigid set of his jaw, the genuine disturbance in his eyes quelled the thought. This was real to him, and that reality pricked at my own composure. "Probably just a bruin," Cale offered with a dismissive shrug. "Or some hiker came through earlier, left their mark." "Perhaps," Ronan conceded, though the word lacked conviction, his doubt a tangible thing in the cool night air. The remainder of the night unfolded without overt incident, yet an invisible weight settled over the camp. Each snap of a twig, every rustle of unseen foliage in the undergrowth sent my gaze darting towards the periphery. Imagination, I chided myself. Woods are alive with sound. Eventually, we retreated, zipping nylon cocoons against the dark, burrowing into synthetic warmth. The forest wrapped us in its quietude once more, punctuated only by the desolate cry of an owl, the sigh of wind through high branches. Deep in the night's heart, something plucked me from sleep. Not a distinct sound, perhaps, but that primal sense of wrongness, an internal alarm. My tent was compact. Ronan's steady breathing was a familiar rhythm beside me. All seemed ordinary, yet the feeling persisted, insistent. Silently, I worked the zipper, easing my head into the chill air. The fire had crumbled to embers, a faint ruby pulse against the gloom. Trees loomed, immense silhouettes swaying subtly, and then I saw them. Footprints, not confined to the creek bank this time, but describing a deliberate circle around our vulnerable tents. Large, starkly defined in the packed earth. My heart hammered against my ribs. I slipped out, bare feet cold on the ground, trying to decipher the narrative etched in the dirt. The prints were undeniably fresh, too massive for any of us. Some thing, some one, had paced around our slumbering forms. Crouching, I traced the edge of an impression, feeling its depth, a testament to significant weight. My gaze swept the perimeter, expecting eyes to gleam back from the Stygian black, but found only the stoic trees and the night's unnerving, watchful silence. I retreated into the tent, quiet as a breath, mind churning. Wake the others? Ignite panic based on tracks in the dirt? What concrete threat could I articulate? Sleep, when it returned, was shallow, fractured, haunted by the recurrent image of those deep, unsettling imprints. Morning arrived and I held my tongue. Why so fear over footprints that might possess a mundane explanation? A lost hiker, an unusually large animal? My rational mind warred with the cold dread settled in my gut. We filled the day with motion, exploring sun-dappled trails, seeking the cascade of a nearby waterfall. The beauty was undeniable, a balm, yet the sensation of being observed, a persistent prickle on the neck, never fully dissipated. Occasionally, I'd see Ronan pause, his shoulders taut with the same unspoken tension I carried. That evening, the fire felt different. Laughter seemed forced, conversation thin, punctuated by long silences. An unspoken question hung heavy in the smoky air, a shared acknowledgement of the unease none dared voice. After a time, Kyle stretched, yawning. "Hitting the sack," he announced. "Got a long trek tomorrow." We murmured assent. Exhaustion pulled at us all. As we prepared to turn in, my eyes caught them again. More prints, not just circling now, but leading distinctly away, into the dense woods, as if someone had stood sentinel just beyond the firelight's reach before retreating. They were fresh, too fresh. I froze, staring. "Ronan," I whispered, a low hiss gesturing. He followed my pointing finger and the color drained from his face as he registered the tracks. "We need to leave," he breathed, the words barely audible. "Now." No argument formed. The wrongness was no longer subtle. It pressed in, suffocating. Staying felt untenable. We moved with stealth, gathering essentials, reluctant to disturb Kyle and Finn prematurely. But as we moved, a sound tore through the stillness, a low, guttural rumble vibrating from the forest's depths. We froze, gazes locked on the wall of blackness. It came again, closer, a resonant growl that raised the hairs on my arms. Not a bear, not anything familiar or benign. "Wake them," Ronan urged, his voice betraying a tremor. I shook Cale, then Finn, urgency sharpening my hushed explanation. Grogginess gave way to alarm as they grasped the fear radiating from us. Gear was snatched, straps tightened, and we plunged onto the return trail, the menacing growl still echoing somewhere behind us, a promise or a threat. My pulse roared in my ears, my mind painting frantic, worst-case scenarios. Every shadow seemed to writhe, every nocturnal rustle amplified into imminent danger. Then, as abruptly as it began, the growling ceased. An eerie, pregnant silence descended. I kept glancing back, muscles coiled, expecting pursuit, but nothing emerged from the swallowing darkness. We moved in tight formation, a tense, silent unit, the only sound the rhythmic crunch of our boots on the leaf litter. Time stretched, distorted by fear, until, finally, the familiar shape of the car materialized through the trees. Gear was flung into the trunk, doors slammed shut, sealing us in a sanctuary of steel and glass. Ronan's hands trembled as he wrestled the key into the ignition, the engine catching with a reassuring roar. Headlights sliced into the woods, illuminating nothing but trees, still and impassive. We drove for a long time without speaking, the miles gradually dissolving the acute tension, though a residue remained. That feeling of being watched, of something vast and unknown lurking just beyond perception, never truly left. To this day, the identity of what shared that clearing with us remains an unsettling enigma. An animal? Perhaps. Or perhaps something else entirely, something ancient and territorial whose threshold we had unwittingly crossed. I only know the deep woods lost their allure that night. I haven't returned. I don't believe I ever will. None of this was ever my asking. The obsidian shadow, calling itself a sedan, materialized 3 weeks back, dragging my deliberately quiet existence down into some nameless abyss. My home sits deliberately tucked away at the terminus of Serpent Creek Spur, a lane that snakes through thick timber before expiring at my doorstep. Half a mile separates me from the nearest soul, solitude, the precise reason I rooted myself here, seeking the balm of silence. Now, that very isolation amplifies the dread. Its first appearance coincided with my departure for the city grind. Parked, perhaps 50 feet shy of my gravel drive. A black Lincoln, immaculate but bearing the subtle wear of miles. Windows like polished night, offering no reflection, no hint of occupancy. Nothing overtly menacing. A breakdown, perhaps. Yet, 12 hours later, under the bruised twilight sky, it remained. Unmoved. A sentinel fixed in place. Morning repeated the tableau. Same vehicle, same station. Compelled, I crunched across the damp verge to inspect. The glass yielded nothing to my peering gaze. My knock on the window echoed unanswered in the woody quiet. Mud, thick and deliberate, obscured the license plate. A detail whose significance bloomed later. A call to the county constabulary proved fruitless. Unless it obstructed passage or bore the clear marks of dereliction, their hands were tied. It did neither. Day bled into day. The Lincoln, a fixture, perpetually vacant, perpetually there. My phone became a tool of documentation. Time-stamped images, a log of its unwavering vigil. I began playing games with my routine, leaving at erratic hours, sometimes cruising past its spot in the dead of night, 3 a.m., darkness swallowing all but its hulking shape, always present, waiting. 2 weeks deep, I surrendered to the unease, ringing my property with the unblinking eyes of security cameras. Daylight footage offered nothing beyond the mundane sway of branches. Night, however, yielded poison. Reviewing the first overnight recording sent tremors through my hands. At precisely 2:17 a.m., its headlamps flared to life. They burned for exactly 180 seconds, then extinguished. No ingress, no egress, just light, then void. The silent ritual repeated for 3 consecutive nights. Last night shattered the pattern. Curled in my armchair, bathed only in the television's flickering cathode glow, the world outside muted. The cable box numerals read 11:43 p.m. when motion snagged my peripheral vision. The obsidian sedan, gliding slow as a hearse, maybe 5 miles per hour. It ghosted past my house. Under the lone sentinel street lamp crowning my drive, the interior was momentarily illuminated. The driver's seat gaped, utterly empty. Air hitched in my throat. Breathing became a conscious, failing effort. I watched, transfixed as the vehicle rolled onward with unnerving precision, maintaining its funereal pace. It reached the driveway's end, executed a seamless turn, and dissolved into the embracing dark. Sleep became an impossibility. I sat rigid in my chair, every light ablaze, a baseball bat heavy across my lap, flinching at the forest's nocturnal whispers. My cameras? Blank, as if the phantom passage had never occurred. This morning, the urge to feign illness was a physical weight, yet I forced the motions of routine. Travel mug grasped, filled with coffee I knew would remain untouched, I stepped towards my own car, and saw it, a stark white rectangle pinned beneath the windshield wiper. The paper felt wrong. Heavy, expensive cardstock, the kind reserved for declarations or summonses, typed in stark, emotionless font. Observation is mutual. I called in sick after all. The morning dissolved into frantic pacing, endless reviewing of empty security feeds, another call to the police. A report was filed this time, grudgingly, but the officer's gaze held the weary patience reserved for the unhinged. Perhaps I am. Yet, the memory of that empty, moving car remained sharp as broken glass. Dusk now bleeds through the trees. The Lincoln is absent from its usual haunt. Whether this absence is reprieve or prelude, I cannot fathom. My hands refuse stillness. Every few minutes, a compulsion drives me to the windows, a futile scan of the encroaching shadows. The security feeds cycle endlessly on my laptop. 4 squares of vacant twilight. My phone shrills. Unknown number. I let the machine answer. Silence, then the void speaks again. Same number. The third time, compelled by a dread deeper than reason, I accept the call. Dead air stretches, then clicks. A voice, synthesized, sexless. We perceive you, Elias. That isn't my name. I sever the connection. It rings again, instantly. I power the device off. My laptop screen spasms. All 4 camera feeds dissolve into static, then blackness. 3 heartbeats later, they flicker back online. The obsidian sedan occupies my driveway. Engine running, a plume of exhaust ghosting into the cooling air. The driver's door swings open, slow, deliberate. No one emerges. It simply hangs agape, an invitation. A vise tightens around my chest. Sweat traces cold paths down my spine despite the evening chill. The baseball bat rests uselessly in the living room. Retrieving it feels secondary to the hypnotic pull of the screen. The open door, the vacant seat, the thrumming engine. A new message materializes on my laptop. No sender, no subject. Just 3 stark words. Commence transit. I snap the laptop shut, then immediately reopen it. Still there, door still open. My phone, inexplicably, illuminates on the desk beside me. Another, unknown number. The synthesized voice speaks without preamble. Delay compounds the consequence. "What is it you want?" My voice cracks, alien. "Enter the vehicle, Elias." "That's not my name. You've got the wrong man." "Error is not within our parameters. Enter the vehicle." The line dies. Through the window, the car idles, a patient beast in the deepening gloom. The open door, the empty seat, waiting. My hand finds the cold comfort of a large kitchen knife in a drawer. It feels absurdly inadequate, yet better than naked fear. Legs trembling, I move towards the front door. As my hand touches a knob, the porch light sputters and dies. One by one, the lights within the house extinguish. Darkness absolute, save for the car's headlamps carving long, distorted shadows across the lawn. The engine's purr remains constant, unnervingly smooth. I step onto the porch, the knife concealed behind my back. The cold air bites, forcing a gasp. "What is this?" I call out, my voice thin against the vast silence. "What do you want from me?" Only the engine's steady rhythm answers, the beckoning door, the empty seat. My cameras are blind. The house phone is dead. My mobile shows no signal bars. Alone. Utterly alone with this machine and its unseen master. One step onto the gravel path. Another. The knife handle grows slick in my sweating palm. 10 feet away now. The tang of exhaust fumes sharpens. I can see the texture of the leather seats bathed in the faint glow of the interior dome light. Suddenly, the radio crackles to life. Static resolving into that same chillingly calm, synthesized voice. "You may retain the blade if it provides solace. It is inconsequential." A primal urge screams to flee back into the darkened house, but an invisible tether holds me fast. A certainty settles. Running only postpones, likely worsens. They are watching. They have been watching. 5 feet. The engine note deepens slightly, a sound like mechanical impatience. The radio hisses again. "Final opportunity for voluntary compliance, Elias." "I'm not." "Enter." I enter. The leather is cold against my back. The door swings shut beside me, unbidden, the click echoing with the finality of a vault ceiling. The knife slips from numb fingers, clattering onto the floor mat. The steering wheel rotates smoothly, guided by unseen hands as the car reverses down the drive. I wrench at the door handle, locked solid. Stab at the window controls. Inert. The radio speaks. Seatbelt engagement requested. Prioritize safety. Laughter bubbles up, raw and hysterical in the confines of the car. Yet, I comply, clicking the belt into place. The sedan accelerates onto the lane, motion fluid and confident. "Where are you taking me?" Silence answers. The radio remains mute. The dashboard displays glow with perfect normalcy. Speed, fuel, temperature. Everything ordinary, except the void where a driver should be, except the wheel turning itself with eerie grace. We drive for what feels like an eternity. Out of my secluded corner of the world onto highways, through sleeping towns whose names blur into meaninglessness. Time loses its mooring. Direction becomes irrelevant. The car maintains impeccable speed, obeys traffic laws with robotic adherence, merges and changes lanes with frictionless precision. Other drivers, cocooned in their own journeys, seem oblivious to the phantom at their flank. My phone remains a dead weight. The knife lies forgotten at my feet. I cease struggling against the doors, the windows. I simply watch the asphalt ribbon unfurl beneath the steady beams of the headlamps. Eventually, inevitably, the highway falls away. We navigate a landscape of stark utility. Warehouses loom like sleeping giants, loading docks yawn into shadow, chain-link fences glitter with razor wire. The streets are deserted canyons in the pre-dawn stillness. Our headlights sweep across blank concrete faces and padlocked gates. The Lincoln turns into a vast parking area, enclosed by high, featureless walls. A heavy gate groans open before us, admitting us into deeper darkness. The engine cuts out. The headlights die. Blackness absolute, save for the faint residual glow of the dashboard instruments. The radio crackles, a final transmission. "Assimilation imminent, Elias. Welcome to reintegration." The dome light flickers on, casting a sickly, pale illumination. And, in its meager glow, I finally see it. A small, black device tucked beneath the dashboard, pulsing with tiny crimson lights. Some intricate control mechanism. My hand reaches towards it. Negative action advised. A new voice, not synthesized, not from the radio, from the back seat. I freeze, blood turning to ice water. Slowly, agonizingly, I turn my head. Empty. The rear seat is vacant. But I heard. Refocus aperture upwards. My gaze drifts to the rearview mirror. A face stares back. Not mine. Someone else's. Smiling faintly. "Greetings, Elias. We have considerable data to correlate." "I am not Elias," I whisper, the words barely audible. The smile broadens. "Affirmative. You are. Memory fragmentation is extensive. Rectification protocols are prepared, hence your retrieval." The dome light extinguishes. In the sudden, profound darkness, the sound of multiple car doors opening, echoing off the concrete. Footsteps converging from all sides. Commence memory restoration. The sedan's locks disengage with a unified, soft click. Light floods the enclosure. Harsh, clinical fluorescent light revealing figures in severe dark suits encircling the vehicle. One opens my door. "Please accompany us, Elias. Disregard the edged implement. As previously stated, it is inconsequential." I exit the car. What alternative remains? The figures form a silent cordon around me. Their faces are impassive masks, professional detachment etched deep. One flashes credentials, a shield, lettering swimming before my strained eyes. "Recovery successful," a voice murmurs into a handheld communicator. "Subject contained. Initiating Phase 2. They guide me towards a heavy metal door set flush into the concrete wall. Above it, stark block letters: Department of Temporal Integrity, Extraction Unit. "I don't understand," I manage. "Coherence will be reestablished." The man with the badge places a firm, impersonal hand on my shoulder. "Latent memories will surface upon procedure initiation. Self-imposed exile has been prolonged, Elias, but identity is inescapable, as is chronology." The metal door groans open. Beyond lies a corridor of sterile white, stretching towards an unseen vanishing point. They propel me forward into the unforgiven light. "Welcome back to 2157, operative. Your absence has been noted." The door seals behind us, the sound a definitive punctuation mark between one reality and the next. My final glimpse is of the obsidian sedan, sitting silent and inert in the stark lot, its purpose fulfilled. My purpose, a sudden fragmented thought flickers. Other assignments, other eras, other identities worn like borrowed clothes, none truly mine.